Hey y'all, CB here at MBS Welding. Got a really cool job here. This is for a buddy of mine. This boy, I known his parents since Moby Dick was a minnow. And this boy, he's a man, but you know, when you're old like me, you call him a boy. I remember him being born. But this old boy, he rides Indian motorcycles. He's on his second one. He got his first one run at 2.5 months and put like 4,800 miles on it. And this one that he's riding now, the 2024 model, he's had it for a year and he's put 10,000 miles on the motorcycle. Boy loves to ride. So he got this Sissy bar for the back of his Indian motorcycle, and we're getting a look at how they assembled this thing. It is powder coated. It's a nice piece, but there's a thing about it that is not the way he wanted it, and we're going to have to modify it. And a part of this involved finding these bolts, because I'm going to be making a jig to hold this thing, to hold this apparatus. I want to make sure it goes right back on the bike. And this was the issue that he had with it. He bought the thing and he had looked at pictures before he bought it. And from the pictures he was looking at, that Indian wasn't smashed down on the seat like that. It's almost like you can't see it. Like it's smashed down so low to the seat that you can't see the Indian. And this is special to me because this is me when I was his age. Check out this dude, man. I'm on my Sportster and I had like I had the baby face and I had hair on my head, and I guess I had to get this old picture out because this boy, he just, it made me think back. This is 1995 in this picture, and here it's 2025, and this boy, he loves to ride his motorcycle, and it reminds me of me enjoying my motorcycle when I was in my 20s. So to get this started out, I started out cutting with a grinder, and when I was doing this part of it, I was really focusing. You don't want to do damage to these parts. You're going to see every little thing. And I didn't have it in my jig yet, so I didn't really want to take it apart. But you can see, I hope, in this video I shot where I got cut through the welds, leaving a little bit of weld at the bottom and a little bit of weld at the top. And I got my groove alignment to where I'm not cutting into anything but the weld. I don't want to damage the round bar. I don't want to damage the flat bar that bracket's made out of. You can see there's my red grinder in the slot behind it. And so I wanted to get, this very first little bit of grinding was just being real precise and making sure I was putting the stone in there without damaging either of these two pieces, only touching the weld. But I didn't have the part welded up in the jig yet, so I didn't want it to come apart. The jig is something that's going to, keep it so that it fits back on the bike. So I've got my ARCCAPTAIN MIG205PRO I'm using 030 diameter solid MIG wire and a mixed gas for this MIG welding. And I've taken these bolts and I went through my bolt bin. I'm going to be sacrificing these bolts, but I went through my bolt bin and I got bolts that fit in those holes as tight as I could get. They were so tight, like I kind of had to thread them in through the powder coating with my fingers. And I'm taking my MIG and I'm taking some 2-inch scrap. I got a piece of tubing here and I'm tacking this thing down. And then I'm going to use also a piece of angle iron that's 2-inch on the other side. And I'm actually welding this thing using those bolts. I'm welding those bolts to the table. And the bolts are welded, or the bolts are tightened tight onto the Sissy bar. And that means that I've got this thing held in place where these two flat bar brackets, no matter what I take apart here, they're going to be where they're supposed to be. So the idea is to have this thing in this jig, take it apart and put it back together. The jig makes it easier to work on anyway, because I tell you, when you work on something like this, every little thing you do damages the metal. Every time you grind, you got to sand out grinding marks. Every time you use a clamp and squeeze, the clamp leaves a mark on the steel. And when you're working on something that goes on a nice motorcycle, you don't want those marks in the metal. If you get those marks in the metal, you got to sand them out. So the little bit of weld that was left on here and the powder coating, that all needed to get smoothed out. This was really a lot of grinding, a lot of sanding on this job. I was amazed how little bit of welding was actually involved if you compare the amount of welding to the amount of sanding and grinding. Now, I got the 872 chop saw with a roller rig here. I've got me a piece of round bar that's the right size. We're adding 6 inches to this Sissy bar. So I made a mark at 6 inches and I made a mark at 12 1/8. It's important to do that because the blade takes out 1/8 of an inch. And then I put my 5/8 round bar, chuck it up in the drill press here, and rotate it while I use the grinder to make my bevel. Now I'm going with a single bevel. I'm only beveling the round bar, and that's going to give me the weld I need without making the weld bigger than necessary. Using an old Harbor Freight moving blanket. I use these quite a bit, but they're not the greatest for welding because they melt. When I get sparks on them and stuff, they melt. But I'm using the blanket and some wood and a piece of angle iron as an alignment tool. And then I get my round bar lined up with the Sissy bar, and we're ready to tack this thing together and extend it to make it higher. On the ARCCAPTAIN MIG205PRO, this is one of the eye control units that I love how you can hook up Bluetooth on your phone and see I can adjust the machine here on my phone. And the first time I saw this feature, I thought it was silly, but man, when you're laying up underneath a truck or you're climbed up on a ladder and you can pull your phone out of your overalls and adjust the heat on your machine, put your phone back in your overalls without climbing out from underneath the truck or a piece of equipment or climbing up and down the ladder. I tell you, that remote operation of that welding machine with that Bluetooth connection, it is really nice. So I get one of my round bars tacked up, move my angle iron piece over, get the other one tacked up. And on the welding on this, I'm going to be like sort of skipping back and forth because it gets hot quick. And every time you put any weld on a bar like this, it moves. You know, the weld expands and shrinks the steel, and as I jump around, I can see it move. I can see it bend and get crooked, and then I can weld opposite the side of it and straighten it back out. Now, this grinding that you see me do right here with the hardstone, where I'm grinding 90 degrees from the weld, this is the fastest way to grind. It's the fastest way to get your stone to remove material, but it's the easiest way to dig into the material. So you got to pay a little bit of attention. Oh, forgive me, I got to do a little advertising for my t-shirts here. These are the NBS Welding t-shirts that Boss Lady Tina's got for sale for $25. They got the NBS Welding on the chest, the American flag on the sleeve, and then the big NBS Welding on the back. Send Tina an email, nbswelding@aol.com. You can request, you can send her a request for a t-shirt and she'll get you hooked up. See how I'm holding the grinding wheel flat here? Once you've cut down your weld some, you're going to want to hold the wheel flat like this, I think, because what this does for me is I'm using that flat surface of the grinding wheel like a straight edge, and it's preventing me from gouging down into the steel too much. It's not the fastest way to remove material. Now, I showed you the faster way to grind away steel is grinding 90 degrees like I was in the beginning, and that'll get her cut down. But once you get down close to the surface of the bar, you're going to want to hold your tool flat, because the flat tool is what'll keep you from digging in and getting really out of shape on your bar. And here I'm using the sanding pad. This is my favorite sanding pad for grinders. I use a 5-inch sanding pad with a 4.5-inch backer on a 4.5-inch right angle grinder, and it does a really good job for me. So there's just a little bit of that sandpaper sticking out around the backer. And then the final stage of removing the scratch marks is I use this the bead brush, and I'll power brush it really aggressively, and that will get out the very last bit of the grinding marks, the sanding marks in it. And I checked with my nephew, actually, who does some powder coating, about getting this powder coated, and I think they might get it powder coated at some point, but we're probably not going to do that right away. And so it was sort of like I was trying to figure out if I was going to paint it or not, and I decided to paint it. It's going to have to be completely stripped down if they decide to get it powder coated anyways, but I decided to paint it when I was done, and that'll get him through the riding season. Whether he powder coats it later or not. And I took some measurements to make sure that the depth of the slots were equal here, and they were. It was perfectly equal. I couldn't really hold it and tack it both. I was able to hold it where I wanted it, and I was able to tack it, but I couldn't do both. So I used my mini puller. I do that a lot on squeezing things in place, and that got it right where I needed it, and I could make sure I was right before I made the tack. And then I got her welded up, which really wasn't, like I say, it's amazing how quick you get things welded. And on jobs like this, there's almost no welding compared to the amount of time you spend with a grinder in your hand. And really, you'd think, oh, there's nothing to the grinding, anybody could do it. But I tell you what, if you do the grinding wrong, you can make it look just as awful as if you do the welding wrong, probably worse. Somebody that is really, really unskilled with a grinder can really damage something like this, almost probably in a way that you can't fix it. And the thing about it, like, you want to use aggressive tools that'll get the work done quickly, but it's the aggressive tools that'll really put bad scratch marks and dig into it in a way that, could just ruin it. And so you gotta know what you're doing to some extent to splice something like this together and make it look like nothing ever happened. It's probably a little bit more difficult than a lot of people would think. And, unfortunately, you get something like this that needs to be modified. And really, if you had all these parts brand new, you could make a new one in a quarter of the time that it would take you to modify something like this. But it's all the cutting it apart and trying not to damage it when you cut it apart, and then welding it back together and hiding the weld by grinding it perfectly and sanding it perfectly and power brushing it so that you can't tell what happened. It's all that work that you wouldn't have to do any of that if you had a whole bunch of brand new parts that were perfect and all you had to do was put it together. But it ain't a perfect world, and stuff like that doesn't always happen. So, if you got to modify something, then you got to modify it. You got to make what they want. And then here's this beautiful Indian motorcycle. He just turned over 10,000 miles on this baby. He just loves to ride it. So when we zoom in now, we can see it's like, yeehaw, man. We can see the Indian. It's not jammed down on the seat where it's like totally gone. We can see that space that we made between the seat and the Indian and the main thing was he's really happy with it, which is, that's what we wanted. We wanted him to be happy with it. And And he is. He thanked me. And he's a good kid. He's really, he was really appreciating that I'd put the work in and done this.